Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Fidelis. It is Cassie and Lauren here this week again after taking a break last week. Today, we are talking about a subject we haven't covered before, and that is the mommy wars. Anyone watching that is a parent, you've probably experienced this in some fashion. Motherhood is something that's very fraught right now. There's a lot of divisive rhetoric out there. People seem to be taking sides about everything. And the inspiration for us talking about this this week was from a friend of ours that had seen this take place in one of her Facebook groups. And essentially, in this particular case, it was people criticizing moms for working outside of the home. And that's something that I've seen that's very common in a lot of Catholic Facebook groups, whether it is criticizing a mom for working outside of the home or criticizing a mom for staying home with her kids and not working. There are lots of groups that are dedicated to both of these camps, and they're specifically Catholic groups, and very frequently they're attacking the other camp.
Yeah.
You know, it's the working mom groups is attacking the stay-at-home moms, and the stay-at-home moms are attacking the working moms. And there's all of this just really damaging rhetoric. Stay-at-home moms are called lazy. Working moms get criticized saying, well, why would you want to let someone go raise your kid for you for, the whole day? And it seems like pretty much no one wins. Mm-hmm. No matter what you do, if you're a mom, you kind of lose.
Yeah.
So is this something that you've experienced, Lauren?
Yeah, big time. Like when I had my first son, I was just working a little bit from home. Like I knew I didn't want to go back to work, but then I also needed to make money. And I also am just one of those people that wants to work. And I think that's my calling. So I was kind of like in between those two camps. And it felt like, it feels like motherhood is really tribal right now. Like you have to align yourself with like, you're either crunchy or you're pro science, or you're an attachment parent, or you're free range. And it's like, you don't get to have very much nuance in the way that you like, identify yourself as a mom. And I found so I was kind of like in both of these social media groups, like groups for stay-at-home moms and groups for working moms. Not a lot, maybe like one of each or two of each or something. But something I found was, and something that I could relate to, is that it's really, really easy to get bitter as a mom. Like it's really easy to think that no matter what you're going through, whether you're staying home or working a little or working outside the home full time or whatever, because I've kind of like dabbled in each one of them to a degree. It's really easy to get bitter and think that your situation is harder than someone else's, when in reality, they're all really hard. And it's really easy to fall into that trap of just focusing on what you don't have when you're going through another state in life. So like when I was staying home with my kids and not working much, I would look at working moms and think, it would be so nice if someone else was changing these poopy diapers, or, this kid is on my last nerve. Like, I just wish that I were in an office right now. And those would be fleeting thoughts, but sometimes, maybe I'm just melodramatic, but sometimes those thoughts can ruin your whole day. And then you have to like sleep on it and wake up to realize that like your life is not horrible. Like you're fine, you're going to be fine. But then on the other hand, now that I work almost full time from home, but my kids are in childcare / school full time, I look at stay-at-home moms and think like, sometimes I'd just like to curl up on the couch and watch Fixer Upper while my kids nap or something. And it's easy to forget about all those really, really difficult things about being a stay-at-home mom, where you feel like you're losing your sanity sometimes because someone smeared poop on the wall again. Like, I don't know if I'm the only mom, but when I was a stay-at-home mom, I felt like I was dealing with poop on the wall every single day. And that is enough to make you feel like you're losing your mind. So I can sympathize with like the bitterness that leads us to that place. But I think that is where a lot of the mommy wars originate. And then when you put a bunch of moms who are all feeling bitter about the same thing in one group, it turns into a bash fest against the other side. And I mean, it's easier said than done, but we need more supporting each other, regardless of our roles, than bashing each other. And it's not productive to identify yourself as I'm this type of mom, end of story, and I'm only going to associate with women in my quote unquote tribe.
Yeah.
And it's not productive to do that, and it's not productive to feel bitter all the time. So I think we got to focus a little bit more on building each other up, which I said is easier said than done.
Yeah, and it's odd to me a little bit to see this happen in Catholic groups, especially because it's just not very Catholic. We've talked about that before. In one of our previous videos, we talked about all the different saints that you and I both like. And one thing that's so great about the Catholic Church is that there are just countless saints for no matter what your situation is or what your story is or what your calling is. There's a saint there that you can take inspiration from. And so when I see this in Catholic groups, and there's lots of Catholic women's groups on Facebook, some of you watching might be in them, and so you might know what we're talking about. A lot of what we talk about here is kind of inspired by these groups.
Yeah.
Either because we agree with what's being said or because we see them and we disagree. But it happens so much in these, Catholic women's groups where they are just at each other's throats and criticizing people. And there's this idea that, in order to be the correct Catholic woman, you have to behave a certain way and parent a certain way. And that's just, it doesn't make sense.
No. And the interesting thing about Catholicism is that sorry, I wish I could because I can hear myself echoing. I don't think they're in here. Let me see. Maybe not. Yeah, no, I don't. Okay, we'll just hope the echo goes away. In Catholicism, we don't identify ourselves by our occupation. So in the secular culture, the typical conversation when you meet someone is like, what's your name? What do you do? And that makes sense. That's kind of like what you jump to when you're trying to get to know somebody. What do you do? But it's easy to fall into that trap of thinking that what you do is your identity. And that's not the case for Catholics. Our identity is that we're children of God. We're humans that are made in the image of God. Full stop. What we do as our vocation, and whether we're stay-at-home moms, work-at-home moms, work out-of-the-home moms, those aren't moral decisions, unless what you're choosing to do is inherently moral. Being a work outside-the-home mom who's a stripper would be wrong. But being a work outside-the-home mom as an occupation is not wrong. And so I think it's easy that we kind of fall into that secular mindset of our occupation is our identity. And that's what leads to this moralizing about which occupation is better. But that is not reflected in church teaching or who the church canonizes. And again, we've said this before, but the church canonizes the people that it wants to be the example to the people of that age. So in St. Gianna Molla's case, the church canonized a working mom, and clearly there was a message being sent that working motherhood is not innately immoral, and we needed that example. And so I think it's just kind of a unfortunate effect of the secular culture that we look at moms and we define them by their occupation, and we try to moralize about which occupation is better, when that's totally not the approach that the church takes to vocations.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, St. Gianna was a working mom, and St. Zélie, she didn't work outside the home. She worked inside the home, but not only did she work inside the home, she was the breadwinner.
Yeah.
She was so successful that her husband stopped working to better support her business.
Yeah, she was extremely successful as a lace maker.
Yes. And then conversely, you have someone like St. Jane Frances de Chantal, who was another saint that we mentioned in our previous video. She devoted herself to caring for her home, her family's estate, until her husband died. So you have examples pretty much everywhere you look of whatever your situation is. So this idea that one is better than the other is, I think it comes from a place of insecurity, which I can understand. But so much of the rhetoric is also just nasty.
Yeah.
I work from home. I don't work outside of the home. I don't see how I could make it work, even though sometimes I wish I could.
Right.
It's just, we can't afford daycare. I would be working to put my kids in daycare. Not that that's not appealing on some level. Trust me, some days it is. It just doesn't make sense. So I'm lucky enough to be able to work from home. But so I guess I kind of, in a way, I don't really have a dog in this fight. I'm kind of in the middle.
Right.
And, but I just see so many really, it's just like people get mean about it. You know, it's not like just that they're criticizing other people. It's, you know, if you're a stay-at-home mom, like I remember when my husband was still in the military, there was this other woman. She wasn't a mom yet. She was, I don't want to say just a wife, but, you know, she didn't have kids yet. And she personally criticized me because at the time I was a stay-at-home mom, and she was slamming me because I had, in an attempt to cheer up another mom, this mom she was saying that she felt bad because she's like, all I do is stay home. I feel like I'm not productive. I feel like I'm not doing anything important. And I sent her this link, you know, one of those where it's like, oh, if you paid stay-at-home moms for all that they did, they would, you know, the salary would need to be over $1 million. And obviously I don't really, truly, literally believe that. But the idea was, hey, I'm going to cheer this woman up. So I sent her the link, and it was public, like on her Facebook page. And, you know, I told her, hey, you know, don't beat yourself up. You do a lot. You work hard really every single day. You work hard. And, you know, hey, according to this, you know, you should be paid $1 million. So, hey, give yourself a high five because you and I apparently should be millionaires.
Right.
And it was just meant to be something tongue in cheek. But then this other woman, you know, takes it and runs with it and, you know, spins it into, you know, basically these lazy girls, this lazy woman is sitting here and all she does is sit on her, you know, butt all day and do nothing. And she thinks she should be paid $1 million when, you know, she doesn't even really do anything with her kids. And, you know, it's just very like personally attacking. And you see that a lot with, you know, and she was a working, you know, wife, obviously. And so you see that a lot in the working mom groups where it's not just saying, oh, well, you know, you should be working. It's like a personal attack. But then on the flip side, I've seen it the other way too, where you have, you know, stay-at-home moms where I've seen them go after working moms and they just say cruel things. Like you're not even the one parenting your kid. Right. And it's that just like, how can you say something like that? How do you say something like that? It's horrible. And so it's not just that they're drawing lines in the sand of where you should be as a mom. It's like they're trying to be hurtful. And it's hard to remember in the moment that this is coming from a place of insecurity and pain, you know, inside themselves. It's not because they literally hate you. It's because they're not secure about, you know, their own situation. And when we've got all of these people shouting each other down about how they're wrong, of course people are insecure. How can you not be insecure given what's happening in the world today when it comes to motherhood?
Yeah. And then you see all these treatises, like these blog posts that go viral about like how it's so great to be a stay-at-home mom and don't feel bad about yourself. But I almost feel like that fuels the fire because stay-at-home moms and working moms respectively have nothing to apologize for. So when we see these blog posts where it's like basically defending that position, it kind of makes me sad because I'm like, you don't really have anything to defend. You're kind of fueling that whole fire between the two sides when you have to come out with a blog post of 10 reasons why it's great to be a stay-at-home mom or vice versa. You know? And my favorite criticism of working moms is in Catholic circles is that St. Gianna was criticized in spite of being a working mother, which I just think is ridiculous. But that's one I've seen a couple of times, and that it really like throws me for a loop every time. So one thing that I wanted to mention too is like, in addition to the church canonizing the saints that it wants us to have as an example, we also have these kind of evolving, I don't want to say worldviews because the worldviews don't change, but these evolving philosophies that help us to get through whatever age that we live in. And I think the church has made it really clear that St. Therese's little way, which is really reflected in the Opus Dei movement, is something for us in modern times. And I say that because St. Therese was made a doctor of the church because of her little way. And that little way says that we're supposed to sanctify ourselves in whatever state of life that we're in, whatever our occupation is, whatever we do on a day-to-day basis. We find holiness not objectively in what that occupation is, because as long as it's a moral obligation, it can literally, or occupation, it can be anything. But we find holiness in how we find God in others and love others and sacrifice our own self-interest in that occupation. So I think the church recognized and really preempted this whole problem that it knew we were going to be facing in the modern world, with women working and class divides kind of in societies and stuff, to back up and say, you know what, it's not, your value and your holiness do not come from whatever your job is or lack thereof. It comes from how you're loving God in your life, regardless of what your state in life is. And so I think we would do well to kind of like go back to that little way of St. Therese, or read St. Jose Maria Escriva, just to kind of like remind ourselves that our holiness doesn't come from what our occupation is, and whether we're a stay-at-home mom or a work-from-home mom. It comes from whether we're loving God in those daily activities.
Yeah, and while we kind of jumped off on the idea of, working moms versus stay-at-home moms, because that's what we were just confronted with just earlier this week. This is obviously not the only topic that there are mommy wars over. Mm-hmm. There are lots of different things that moms, butt heads about for some reason that just doesn't even make sense.
Yeah.
But it happens all the time. And I mean, I've seen it a lot. Are there other things that you've seen or have been subjected to?
Well, definitely the whole pro-science versus crunchy is a big one, like vaccines versus not vaccinating. And you and I have really strong opinions on those, but I wish that we didn't have to go into an all-out war. Like, at the end of the day, we just need to accept what each other does. You know what I mean?
Well, I feel like when it comes to vaccines, that's a whole other discussion.
Yeah, I mean, I think
but yes, that's a very, very fraught environment.
It's good to promote what we know to be true in science, but it's another thing to personally berate people who make decisions based on misinterpretations, maybe, of science.
Yeah.
So the personal attacks
are never
point. Yeah.
That's one thing that I think that even if someone is wrong about something, like say vaccines,
mm-hmm.
It's important to remember that at worst, well, minus maybe Dr. Wakefield, he maybe does not apply to this. Everyone else, at worst, they are mistaken. They're not evil. Mm-hmm. They're just, they just don't know better.
Yeah, yeah. And it's the mommy wars get ugly in that debate when we start making assumptions about the other person's motives rather than just accepting that they're mistaken and trying to share what we know to be true with them. Yes.
But the crunchy versus I don't even know what like not crunchy would be, because I'm not a crunchy mom. I don't care if someone else is a crunchy mom, but that's just not my that's not my thing. Mm-hmm. But yeah, there's a lot of like the whole extended breastfeeding and baby wearing versus a stroller, and all of these things. It's like if you're not doing motherhood the way that I am, then mm-hmm. you're not as good of a mom as I am. Right. I remember, as a perfect example, do you remember that Time magazine cover from a few years ago?
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember the name of the model, the mom that she was an attachment parent.
Yeah, that's not such a war.
Yes, and this is a perfect example of stirring this all up. Like it had to be intentionally.
For sure.
There's no way it wasn't. But in case anyone didn't see it, it was a picture of this woman, and she was like this skinny, beautiful, supermodel looking woman, and like trendy skinny jeans, and she's standing there, and her blonde hair is perfectly styled in this like perfectly messy little bun, and she's got this like look on her face. Mm-hmm. And she's looking straight into the camera, like hands on her hips, and she's got her son, who I think was like 4 or 5, and he's still breastfeeding. And he was standing on a stool, standing up, breastfeeding, and also looking into the camera while he did it. Yeah. And the headline was, "Are you mom enough?"
Yeah, that was completely intentional. I mean, I work in PR, and I'm so jaded now about what they use to bait people and get clicks. But yeah, that stirred up such a huge debate. because there's the attachment parent versus like not necessarily attachment parent. And for some reason that's become a war. Like, it's fine to be either one. Why do we have to fight about it?
Yeah, and there's this idea that too with like the breastfeeding versus bottle feeding. And personally, I haven't breastfed any of my kids. I've tried to breastfeed with several of them, and it just has never worked out for various reasons. And I personally do not care enough to, pursue it that long. But I have nothing against breastfeeding. Hey, you do you. I just, like. The first time I didn't make enough breast milk. My second child, I tried to breastfeed, and he is allergic to all dairy. He cannot have dairy. He violently vomits. And I remember actually after that, this is kind of a funny example of exactly what we're talking about. Someone had told me, well, you could just eliminate all dairy out of your diet and then you can still breastfeed. So you want him to have what's best for him? And I'm sitting there going, well, formula is just as good. Why do I have to put myself through all of that?
Right. Yeah.
But, and I don't know if this is something you may have seen because it was in one of these Catholic Facebook like women groups, but it's a perfect example. Was that someone had said Saint Zelly, she famously did not breastfeed. She had to send her children away to a wet nurse. And someone had said that she was a saint despite the fact that she could not breastfeed.
Yeah. Which is
like she was lucky enough to be named a saint even though she didn't breastfeed her children.
I know, I love it. That's like the one St. Gianna was canonized in spite of being a doctor.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen people say these things where it's like if you're not breastfeeding or you don't stay at home, then, somehow you're deficient as a woman.
And here's the thing, like, I think most of us are like you and I, where we're just like, I don't care, like, make sure your kid gets fed. Like, I'm pretty sure that's how 99% of the population feels. But then you'll have that one person in every group that's like anti the other side. And it forces everyone else to feel like they have to pick a side now because, oh, this person hates bottle feeding moms, so I have to be like militantly pro bottle to stand up for them. But the reality is, like, we should be able to go about our lives without having to take this hardline stance on all these stupid issues. Like, these are not life and death issues. Vaccines are life and death issues, so I think that's like a little bit of an exception. But bottle feeding versus breastfeeding, come on. Baby wearing versus using a stroller. Like, our mom brains should not have to have, and I say this because I was thrust into these debates when I had my first kid, and I feel a little bitter about it. I wish I hadn't been, but like, moms shouldn't have all this space in our brains taken up by which side of the line we fall on all these trivial issues that are not moral, questions. But you go in, and this is why today I'm only part of one Catholic women's group, and I only check it like once a week because I'm just over it. Like, everything turns into a debate over things that don't matter, and it just takes up way too much space in my brain. But it's not right. And for new moms that are looking for support to have to be subjected to that, we really have to re-examine like how far we've come in this whole debate over everything issue. Yeah.
And I definitely think that you're right, that most people, they're just trying to, get along the best they can and do the best they can. And they don't really care how other people parent. That's certainly the experience I've had with almost every mother I've ever known. But we just get drawn into, having to pick a side and fight this battle. And a lot of it is because, like you said, there's that one person that's really loud, but then there's also the media, which was another example that, you've given. And then the Time magazine, that's another example. But it's like there are all of these outside factors that are kind of forcing us to engage. And the thing is that we're Catholics and we don't have to participate in this because we have so many examples that are better. And the Catholic Church does not dictate that we parent a certain way, that they don't say that there's a right way to be a woman, which is, again, it's even more frustrating when I see it in Catholic groups for just that reason. Exactly. When I see, it's irritating when I see men do it, I just kind of want to be like, okay, neckbeard, go back to your like little fundy circle. Like, because it doesn't come from a Catholic mindset. That's a Protestant mindset. This whole mindset where you have to be, in a floor-length denim jumper dress with, your 18 kids and, you can't go work outside the home. That's not a Catholic mindset.
that comes from Puritanism, which is a Protestant. It's a Protestant worldview, and that's not an indictment of all Protestants, because obviously so many Protestants are totally balanced on this. That I'm just saying that for somehow that Puritan worldview like really infiltrated the Catholic Church in certain sectors, and you see that when like men have these opinions about like what women should wear and the fact that they shouldn't work outside the home and stuff.
Well, but I mean, it's like when I see men do it, I kind of roll my eyes a little bit at it, and I'm just like, okay, you can just be quiet and go away. When I see other women do it, then it's like a Catholic woman, and she is, because I've seen it on both sides. This isn't like a stay-at-home mom problem or a working mom. Like this, it goes both ways. I've seen it both ways, because like I said, being a working from home mom, I'm kind of in the middle.
Right. Exactly.
But when I see it from other women, directed towards other women, then it's like, it feels almost like a betrayal. Like you're betraying your fellow women, your fellow Catholic women.
Yeah, it's not good for us. I mean, let's think of some practical things that like Catholic women can do to kind of like shift the way that we view these. I mean, like one thing I can think of is scroll past the Facebook post. Like, don't engage. Like, stop giving so much airtime to these stupid debates that we shouldn't be forced to take a side on. Read about a whole wide variety of Catholic saints and see how the church has canonized people that are stay-at-home moms, work-at-home moms, work outside the home moms, and everything in between. We've got nuns, we've got consecrated virgins, we've got like the whole spectrum of women. And then there's also, the church does have writings that are for women, but you notice like the church doesn't have writings that are separate for stay-at-home moms versus working moms, or like attachment parents versus non-attachment parents. St. John Paul II has a beautiful letter to women, and it talks about the feminine genius. And those kind of things I feel like would unite us if we talked about like what's unique about us as women rather than what's different about us among us as moms. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it definitely helps to try to remember what brings us together as opposed to what separates us, especially, we have this amazing thing that does bring us together, and that's the church.
Yeah.
We have the Catholic Church that unites us and binds us, and we aren't on opposite sides. There's no reason to be fighting each other. So, and like you mentioned with suggestions to just scroll on, especially when you have like a really good debate, it's really hard to do this. I fall into the trap of not doing this all the time. So this is something I still have to work on. But, there's that saying on social media, don't feed the trolls.
Yeah.
When everyone is having a pleasant conversation, and there's always that one person that has to jump in and say something inflammatory or say something that is purposely stirring the pot, or, maybe they really are just that crazy person that thinks that, oh, well, you circumcised your son. You're a terrible mother that's mutilating your children.
Yeah, I love that one.
I have seen
Oh, big time.
But most moms don't care. It's like, hey, circumcise, don't circumcise, do your thing, honey, Exactly. But it's like, then there's that one person that has to jump in, whatever the conversation is, and they're just this crazy person that actually, is that radical. It's really hard.
Yeah.
That's something that, I think we could all resolve to do from, that would probably help a lot. Just don't engage that person. Just ignore them. Everyone collectively ignore the crazy person and just let them, vent into the nothing about, why, moms who breastfeed are, terrible. I don't know.
Yeah. And the things that we can unite over are more fun, like humor. I know in the group that you and I are in, there's like occasionally there's like GIF threads and like meme threads that are hilarious, and everyone can unite over like sharing funny moments and stuff that's not inflammatory. And I'm not saying that you just have to have boring conversations that are not controversial at all, but when you do see that one troll, you don't necessarily have to jump on it and dogpile and turn it into a thing. I think we end up doing that because we find it entertaining more than like to defend our position. I think we just find it entertaining to engage in the fight. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think it also, it goes back to that insecurity, because even if it's something that, that you made the right decision for yourself and for your family, you still can't help but feel attacked a little bit.
Yeah, that's true.
So it's like, even if that's not the case.
Mm-hmm.
So I know it's easy for me to get really defensive, especially about, I mean, when you have that person that is, shouting about how, moms who work are terrible and, are abandoning their children, it's really easy to feel defensive, even though it's not directed towards you personally. And that person is wrong.
Yeah.
They're wrong. It's hard to just, let it go. Don't say anything. It's so hard because it's like, you feel like you have to stand up for yourself. You have to defend yourself.
Yeah. I think it definitely picks on that. Maybe before you made that decision to circumcise or not circumcise, or to breastfeed or not breastfeed, or whatever the case may be, you did have to grapple with those questions. And then when the issue comes back up again, you're reminded of the things that made you take pause in the first place when you were deciding which direction you were going to go. And I think that you make a perfect point, and the fact that it just does bring out maybe lingering insecurities that we have about those decisions. But it's important to, I think we can take comfort in the fact that so many of those things are not moral decisions. They're morally neutral. And so we don't have to have this pang of conscience over which way we went either way.
Mm-hmm.
People try to say circumcision is moral. It's not.
Yeah, the church doesn't care if you circumcise or don't circumcise your sons. The church does not care if you breastfeed or don't breastfeed. No one at the Vatican is going to get onto you for using a stroller or for baby wearing. Yeah. Breastfeeding. They even Pope Francis a few years ago, made sure to reiterate, hey, if you need to breastfeed, breastfeed your child right there in mass. Mm-hmm. You don't need to go somewhere private. You don't need to cover up. What you're doing is a beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
The church doesn't ascribe morality to these things. So I think it really does come back down to insecurity. And a lot of that, I mean, I guess I can't say decisively because I wasn't a mother 30, 40 years ago. But I mean, I really feel like motherhood is just, it's, I don't want to say under attack, but.
Oh, it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well then you know what I'm saying. It's like motherhood is just so, it's like this hot button issue now, and we're told a million different ways of how we're supposed to be or not be, and we have to love our post-baby bodies, but we also have to find a way to keep ourselves looking trim and sexy, and we have to be age appropriate and parent modest, but then we also have to still figure out a way to be hot for date night with our husbands. We have to, deal with the spit up and the crying and babies and kids all over us all day. And then we still have to go be a tiger in bed at night. It's like we have to fit so many different molds, and we're pulled so many different ways. It's like there's no respite at all. And it's easy to just kind of snap. Mm-hmm. I mean, how can you not? You're being attacked on every front. Yeah. Everywhere you look. And it's from the prevailing culture.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and social media it's such a double-edged sword in that whole fight, because on the one hand, when you're an isolated stay-at-home mom or work-from-home mom, social media is where your friends are. It's where you're going to rant about the things that you need to get off your chest. It's where you're going to get support. It's where you're going to ask questions, because not all of us are surrounded by this village of other physical human beings that we can go knock on their door and ask, what do you do when your kid has this temperature fever or whatever. So it can be such a great resource for support, but it also can be the source of so much contention. And social media algorithms are set up to capitalize on hot button issues. So when something controversial comes up, posts that are getting more comments are going to be higher up in your feed and that kind of thing. So those contentious issues are always just kind of thrown in front of you, whether you like it or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I wish I knew why it was something like motherhood is now so, there are all of these battles that are being waged. What is it in the culture that makes what I don't know. Well, maybe it was this way 40 years ago too. I don't know. I wasn't around. I feel like it wasn't. And I really sometimes sit back and wonder, well, what happened? Why is it going on like this?
I don't know like the whole timeline, but the book, I think I mentioned it one time, Subverted, that's what it's called, where she talks about the women's movement. That author talks about how Betty Friedan wrote about how women were feeling in the 1950s. Women were starting to feel more isolated and disenfranchised as stay-at-home moms because industrialization had happened, but women hadn't fully integrated into the workforce. And then you have like abortion is introduced as this, and that implied that having a career was better than being a mom when you have abortion marketed as something that can help you to have a career and help you have an education and stuff. It seems like all these things coalesce to just kind of break down the family in general. I would like to know more about what happened as well, but it seems like that whole fight has just it's gone on for so long that now we are where we are today. And I feel like our generation has kind of seen the effects of what happened in the women's movement and the culture of death. And we're kind of being faced with this decision to take like a more decisive action on whether we're going to perpetuate those confusions or whether we're going to like purposely take our generation and our kids' generation in a different direction. And that's why I think these conversations are important, because we need to like stop and take a breath and evaluate where we are and make decisions to do things differently going forward.
Yeah, and that includes understanding that someone who does something differently, they're not doing it as an attack on you. Mm-hmm. What was this blog post I saw a while back? And it's kind of funny. It wasn't specifically related to this. I think it was, maybe it kind of was, but basically it was like she saw another mom in the food court and her daughter was like all put together. This other woman's daughter was all put together and, was eating nicely while her kids were a hot mess and she was a hot mess. And the other mom like started, cleaning up everything really nicely. And she just felt like so defensive about it because it was like this mom was super put together, her kids were, and she was cleaning up her area. And she stopped and realized, she's not cleaning at you.
Yeah.
She's not doing it like at you.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's something that's good to remember. Like, hey, stay-at-home moms, like someone that works outside the home, they're not doing it specifically to make you feel bad. Exactly. No one's doing it, as an FU to whoever's on the other side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and no matter what you choose, you're not going to get support from. You're always going to have haters, regardless of whether you choose to be a stay-at-home mom or a work outside the house mom or whatever. So you might as well just learn to embrace the haters and move on.
Yeah, it would be nice if we could support each other more. And you see that all the time. We always see that. There's always like blog posts and whatever that sit there and, I wish moms could just come together and support each other. And it seems like it's something that a lot of people want. So why do you think it still doesn't happen? Like we all sit there and say that that's what we want. We want the mommy wars to end. So why are they not ending? Yeah.
I don't think a lot of people really want the mommy wars to end. I think there's so many people that thrive off of drama. For some reason, I don't know, but it seems like people really do enjoy the debate. So I don't know. And it's a lot easier said than done, like we said, but I think we do have to have like specific resolutions, because the definition of insanity is to keep doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result every time. So if you really do want the mommy wars to end and you want to do your part in that, like make some resolutions, whether that's to not feed the trolls on social media, or it could be that you want to pray for people that are in a different state of life than you. If you're a stay-at-home mom, like make it your daily prayer to pray for working moms, or whatever it is that you can do to cultivate like more unity and peace. I think it's going to come from us on an individual level, and just kind of like taking stock of what the situation is so that we can figure out what we need to do to change it.
I really like the suggestion of, taking a daily prayer to pray for those who are in like the opposite situation. Like if you're a stay-at-home mom, take a minute every day and pray for working moms. I think that's really great. That's a good idea.
I think I'll do that.
Well, yeah, we would have to pray for both though, because we
are
the weird little middle ground area.
Yeah, I think that makes us uniquely qualified to have this conversation, because we can really see things from a little bit more of an objective place.
Yeah.
And sort of know the stages of both at the same time.
Yeah, and I mean, I will say, like, It's funny because there's, you know, as an example, like there's more common ground than if we just look for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I work from home, so I have a lot in common with stay-at-home moms. And specifically, I mean, like the isolation, that's one thing that's really difficult for me is that I feel lonely a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you're home all day. You don't really interact with a whole lot of adults. You're with your kids all the time. By the time your husband comes home, you're just exhausted and just kind of over everything. And you don't really get a lot of adult just engagement, except for social media, which is not very healthy. But that's it. And so I kind of assumed, well, hey, at least that's one thing that, moms who work outside of the home have something going for them. And then I talked to moms who work outside of the home, and it was, no, I'm lonely too.
Yeah.
I'm at work, but I'm sitting in my cubicle or in my office and I'm working alone. And the only time I really talk to people, it's for like 5 minutes and it's work related. Mm-hmm. And then I drive home and I deal with my kids and then I go to bed. I don't get to have substantial, meaningful conversations, just like you don't.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of like, wow, like we have this thing in common that I never would have really thought about. But now that I have, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Like there's middle ground there. We just have to be willing to look for it.
Yeah. And I think even with stay-at-home moms, like we can think that they have more social interaction because of like play dates. But I know from when I was doing play dates, like a lot of times you're going on play dates because it's your kids' friends, not necessarily to hang out with your own. And then once you are with them, you're trying to watch your kids and make sure they don't die. So there's not necessarily like a fruitful conversation happening.
And you're being interrupted every 5 minutes. Mommy,
yes.
Mommy.
Yeah. And really like you're really trying to make sure they don't die. Like my kids are kind of kamikaze at the park and stuff. Like they're going to try to dive off of everything that they see. It's just a mess. But yeah, I think loneliness is probably a struggle. It's so ironic that we have social media where everyone comes together and yet loneliness is like the biggest problem for moms today.
Yeah, it really is. Mm-hmm. And it's just, we're all struggling through motherhood. I think that's kind of the common thread when you really get down to it. We're all just struggling to get through. And we're doing the best we can. And it's so easy to look at someone else and think they've got it better. Mm-hmm. They've got it easier. They've, or they've got more money or, they were able to do something that I couldn't. And on the surface, that's what it appears to be, but that doesn't make it true. And I think that comes back to the whole defensiveness issue is that we feel like, someone that's able to breastfeed when I wasn't, that it brings up these doubts and resentments. And so then it gets kind of unleashed towards that person or, you gave up your career to stay home with your children. And while that was the best choice for your family, you see someone who's got this thriving, high-powered career and now you're doubting yourself.
Yeah.
So it's hard. It's really hard. And we're all just human. We're all just trying to make it and do the best we can. And it would be really nice if culturally and societally motherhood was better supported and it wasn't this, toxic atmosphere.
Yeah. Yeah, we have to keep in mind that like advertising and social media algorithms and anything that where there's ad revenue happening is going to be working against mom. It's going to be playing off of the divisiveness. So just being able to see past kind of like the fact that we're being baited on purpose might be helpful too. And just to ascribe better motives to people than what we might get the impression of from the way that the world is presented to us through social media and digital media.
Yeah, I mean, the grass is always greener on the other side. That doesn't mean that it actually really is in reality. Exactly. And, if you're struggling, then, sit down, say a prayer, look to one of your saints. Mm-hmm. Anything you got, there's a saint for you.
Yeah.
So for me, Saint Zelly, she's like my homegirl. She's like my favorite right now.
Really? Yeah. I like her. I think St. Gianna is the one I turn to the most because I always wonder like if she struggled with the feelings of guilt, when she had to leave the house, or in my case, like when I drop off my kids at school, and a lot of times one of them will cry and they'll say like, I want to be with you. And you always struggle with that, like separation. And it makes me question every day, am I doing the right thing? Should I work fewer hours? Like, should I be working at all? And even though they're fleeting thoughts, it's nice to be able to think that there might be someone in heaven that was canonized, even though she went through the same struggles.
Yeah, and I mean that's one of the nice things about relics. Being able to, like, my patron saint is Saint Maria Goretti, and I never really connected with her until I saw her relics on the tour that went around the United States that came to Jacksonville, and so I was able to see her and venerate her. It's her actual skeleton right there in her coffin right in front of me. And when you're able to see relics of the person, whether it's first class relics or second class relics or whatever, it helps me a lot because it's a reminder these were real people. Like Saint Gianna was I know we know that, but it's like, it's hard to imagine that this person that's a saint was a real person that had real emotions and real struggles. And so when you kind of remember, like, hey, this wasn't just some pious person who, was perfect and never struggled all the time. Like, Saint Gianna was a real woman. Yeah. She was a real person. And I'm sure that she struggled with her calling just as much as we do, or Saint Zélie, or Saint Jane, or whoever it may be, Saint Martha. We all struggle. And we even have a biblical example of Saint Martha struggling with her vocation.
Yeah, exactly.
And actually it was kind of I don't know if Martha and Mary in that particular instance were mothers, but it was kind of a little bit of like the mommy wars going on there.
Exactly. Yeah. And how we do have to have our priorities in order, but we don't have to necessarily change our state in life in order to be more happy. We just have to be doing the right thing in whatever state that we've chosen.
Yeah, and it's helpful, to look at saints and remember, like, hey, they probably experienced some of the same feelings that you're feeling, like what you said with Saint Gianna. She's a saint. That doesn't mean that she wasn't human. She was a person, and like we know Saint Zélie, we know she struggled with parenting Saint Therese as a toddler because she was, through temper tantrums, and even Jesus, like, got down on his knees in the Garden of Gethsemane and begged God to take this cup from him.
Yep.
And not that that's really relevant to the mommy wars, but the point is that, we have so many examples of people in the church that went through struggles, and we can lean on them when we're having trouble.
Yeah. We
don't have to just kind of go through this alone. That's another one of the beauties of the Catholic Church, is that we're not alone. We have our family here in the church here with us on earth, and then we have all of the saints there to help guide us.
So maybe exit Facebook once in a while and pick up the saint's biography.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
So
I think that's a great conclusion to this conversation. I mean, just reminding people about saints and their example, and knowing that loneliness and isolation that we can feel is not something that we're the only people that have ever experienced it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So in conclusion, try to, see things from other people's perspectives, and, lean on the saints, try to read about them and draw inspiration from them, and just know you're not alone. So
yeah. We're here to relate to you.
That's it for us here today. We will be back next week, and make sure to follow us on Twitter. It's Twitter at Fidelis Women. And so for Cassie and Lauren, that is it for today. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Bye.